Welcome to our deep dive. We're taking a look at the psychology of money today.
Oh, yeah. Some really interesting excerpts from this book.
Definitely. And, I think it's so cool how, right off the bat, Morgan Housel, the author, makes it clear that...
It's not just about being smart.
Yeah. Being good with money, it's not about...
It's about behavior.
Yes.
It's about behavior. And he tells this crazy story about this executive who was, super successful, but...
Throwing money around.
Yes. A $500 charge was nothing to him. It was an insult.
And it shows you that even if you're super smart, if you
haven't mastered...
have those emotions...
Yeah, your emotions and behaviors.
You can still trip up.
Exactly.
The time.
And then to contrast that, he brings up this guy, Ronald Reed.
The janitor?
Yeah, a janitor and gas station attendant.
Who quietly built an $8 million fortune.
It's incredible, right?
Yeah, it just shows you that it's not about...
It's not about your background.
It's not about having some fancy degree.
No, it's about consistency.
Yeah, and patience, discipline.
A long-term
vision.
Perspective.
Right. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so behavior's huge, but then he digs deeper. He talks about how our own personal histories actually shape our behavior.
Yeah, and he highlights this research by these economists.
Malmendier and Nagel.
Right. They found that your willingness to take risks
is connected to...
It was heavily influenced by...
the economy when you were young.
Yeah, when you were growing up.
That's fascinating.
Makes you think about your own life, If you grew up during a boom, you might be more likely to...
Take risks.
Take chances.
But if you saw a downturn, you might be whoa, I got to be careful.
Yeah, I need to be more cautious.
Right.
And it's crazy how these early experiences, they really can stick with you.
Even if you don't even remember them.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's powerful.
It is. And to show this, Housel tells the story of Bill Gross.
Oh, the Bond King, right.
Yes. And Gross himself says...
if he was born a decade earlier or later...
things might have been totally different for him.
Totally.
It's wild. And what's interesting is that his career, it lined up perfectly.
Was that falling interest rates?
Yeah, which was...
amazing for bond investors.
Exactly. So it wasn't just about his skills.
Yeah, there were bigger forces at play.
That really helped him succeed. Makes you wonder how many other people out there could have been.
The next Bill Gross.
Yeah, but the timing wasn't right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got behavior, we've got our personal history, but then Housel shares this anecdote about John Bogle.
Oh, the Vanguard founder?
Yes. So he was at this party, a billionaire's party.
With Kurt Vonnegut.
And Joseph Heller, the author of Catch-22.
Yeah.
And Vonnegut points out to Heller that their host, who was a hedge fund manager, probably made more in a single day
than Heller made from his book over its entire lifetime.
Catch-22, this iconic book.
It's amazing.
I know. And Heller's response
is brilliant. He says, yes, but I have something he will never have enough. It's so simple, but it gets to the core.
The heart of it.
Of this whole idea of wealth.
Yeah, this tension between...
feeling like you have enough.
Yeah. And wanting more.
Even when you already have a lot.
So true, so true. And then he brings up Rajat Gupta, who had this incredible rise.
Became the CEO of McKinsey.
And had a $100 million fortune.
But it wasn't enough.
No, he wanted more. And he got involved in...
insider trading.
Which landed him in...
big trouble.
Big trouble, yeah. It was kind of cautionary tale.
Yes. It makes you wonder.
Where does ambition...
cross the line?
Yeah, become greed.
It's a tough question, and I think everyone wrestles with that in some way.
Oh, absolutely.
How much is enough for you? How do we balance...
it's a desire for security?
Yeah, security, and then the potential downsides of always wanting more.
It's a constant struggle.
Right. And Housel, he doesn't give you any easy answers.
No.
But he encourages us to really think about it, to be introspective. And
to avoid that.
Of comparing ourselves to others. Yeah, because that can just fuel this endless cycle of wanting more and more.
Exactly. And this brings us to a concept he uses to illustrate how small changes can lead to big effects over time.
The compounding snowball.
Yes. And he starts by talking about ice ages.
Those tiny shifts in the Earth's orbit.
That over centuries can create these massive ice sheets.
And it's a great analogy for compounding.
Yeah, where those little changes, like you said, can have...
huge effects over time.
Exactly. It's incredible how that same principle applies to finance.
Oh, absolutely.
He brings up Warren Buffett.
The ultimate example of compounding.
I know. And Housel reveals this crazy fact. If Buffett had started investing at a typical age,
His net worth would be like 99.9% lower.
mind-blowing. Like the impact of those extra years is
But
just...
what unimaginable.
It really highlights the power of starting early. And to make this point even clearer, he compares Buffett to Jim Simons.
Oh, the mathematician behind Renaissance technologies.
Yeah. And Simons has these amazing returns, even higher than Buffett's on average.
But his overall wealth is much less
Why?
because he didn't start investing until he was 50.
Oh, wow.
So even though he's been incredibly successful,
He's had less time.
less time for that money to compound.
It really drives home just how important time is.
Yeah.
But it's not just about sitting back and waiting. Housel also stresses that survival is like the unsung hero of wealth.
He uses this example of Jesse Livermore.
Oh, the legendary stock trader.
Made a killing during the 1929 crash.
But then lost it all.
It shows that making money and keeping money,
Two very different things.
you got to stay in the game.
Long enough for that compounding to really work.
Absolutely.
So we're seeing this theme of patience being key. But as you said, staying in the game is crucial. What are some strategies to weather those financial storms that are bound to come?
Well, it starts with perspective, having that long-term vision, not panicking when the market goes through those cycles,
Which it always does.
which it always will, and then diversification.
Not putting all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. And of course, that emergency fund.
For those unexpected expenses.
Yes, that's crucial.
So important. Okay, so this leads to another idea he calls the price of admission. He says that market returns, they come with a price.
Volatility, fear.
Doubt, uncertainty.
It's like you can't have the highs without the lows.
It's like wanting the thrills of the roller coaster, but not wanting the drops and the turns.
Exactly.
And to prove this point, he brings up companies like Netflix and Monster Beverage.
Massive successes.
Oh.
Wild rides along the way.
Yeah, their stock prices have been all over the place.
But trying to avoid those drops, trying to time the market,
It's nearly impossible.
and you could miss out on those big gains.
It's like trying to dodge raindrops. They're
Exactly.
probably going to get wet.
So it's best to just embrace it.
Embrace the volatility.
And that's part of the journey.
It seems like the best approach, right? To accept that it's going to be bumpy.
Yeah.
But what about people who try to avoid paying that price of admission completely? What happens then?
Well, Housey uses the example of General Electric under Jack Welch.
Ah, interesting.
Welch was known for manipulating earnings to make it look like,
Smooth sailing.
yeah, like everything was perfect and predictable.
But it was all a facade,
And eventually it caught up with them.
leading to massive losses.
It just shows you can't fake it.
Yeah, transparency is key.
And accepting that volatility is just part of the market.
It's a natural part of the game.
Absolutely.
So instead of trying to outsmart the market
Focus on staying in the game
for the long haul.
for the long haul.
Right. And one way to do that, he says, is to build room for error into your financial plan.
Yeah, create that cushion
A buffer to absorb those unexpected setbacks.
so you don't get completely derailed.
It's like having an emergency fund, but for your entire financial well-being.
Exactly.
Can you give us an example of what that looks like in practice?
Sure, think of it like a blackjack player who's counting cards. Even when the odds are in their favor, they can still have a few bad hands. And if they don't have enough chips to keep playing,
They're out of the game.
it's the same with finances. You need that cushion to weather the storms.
So it's about acknowledging that life, like the market, is full of surprises.
And you can't predict everything.
Right. Building in that room for error is like accepting that you're human
That you're going to make mistakes.
and that unexpected things are going to happen.
You need that buffer.
That financial oxygen mask.
Exactly.
Love that analogy. So it's about building in flexibility and options.
Mm.
What are some ways to create that room for error in our lives?
Well, it could mean having a slightly bigger emergency fund than you think you need.
Okay.
Maybe diversifying your income streams.
Having multiple sources of income.
Yeah, or being open to different job opportunities.
So being adaptable,
And having a plan B.
even a plan C, just in case.
Exactly. It's not about being reckless. It's
Right.
about acknowledging that life throws curveballs.
And being prepared.
You want to be ready for anything. So important. And this leads to another interesting idea. Housel says sometimes it's okay to be reasonable, not perfectly rational.
We're not robots.
Right. We have emotions.
Biases, experiences.
And those things matter, even if they don't fit the perfect financial model.
yeah, sometimes you got to bend the rules a little.
So when does it make sense to be reasonable instead of rigidly rational?
Well, one example is home bias.
This tendency to invest in companies from your own country.
Even if it's not the most diverse approach.
Like putting all your eggs in one basket, geographically.
Right. But people often feel more comfortable
Investing in what they know.
It feels familiar.
Makes sense.
So a little home bias.
Not perfectly rational,
It
but
can be reasonable.
especially if it keeps you engaged in the market.
That emotional connection, it can be powerful.
What about other examples? When else might it make sense to be reasonable?
Well, he talks about the allure of picking individual stocks.
Oh, yeah.
Index funds are generally considered more rational for most people.
Picking stocks, it's exciting.
I get that.
It gives you a sense of control.
You're in the driver's seat.
You can express your interests.
Support companies you believe in.
So if that keeps you invested over the long term,
Maybe it's a reasonable trade-off.
even if it's not the most statistically optimal strategy,
It's about finding that balance.
between what makes sense financially.
And what keeps you motivated.
And to illustrate this, Housel shares a story about Jack Bogle.
Mr. Index Fund himself,
He actually invested in his son's actively managed funds.
even though that went against his own philosophy.
It just goes to show you, even most rational minds,
We're all human.
we're all influenced by our emotions and connections.
So true. Speaking of influences, Housel dives into how our decisions are often driven by the stories we create in our minds.
Our brains are wired for stories.
We love a good narrative,
They help us make sense of the world.
especially complex things like the economy,
But those narratives,
can really influence our choices.
even if we're not aware of it.
So we're basically crafting our own financial fairy tales.
Sometimes with happy endings, sometimes not.
And he uses a powerful example, the 2008 financial crisis.
That was fueled in part by this narrative of ever-rising housing prices.
People thought real estate was a sure thing,
It became a self-fulfilling prophecy
driving prices up and up.
until the bubble burst,
And when it did, fear took over.
and it created this downward spiral.
It's amazing how these narratives, good or bad, can impact the entire economy,
Yeah, it highlights the importance of questioning assumptions.
especially when everyone's following the same story.
Just because something was true in the past,
Doesn't mean it'll always be true.
the world's constantly changing.
So how do we become more aware of these narratives? How do we avoid getting swept up in them?
It's about cultivating skepticism,
Questioning those prevailing assumptions.
being the one who asks, what if this is wrong?
What if things don't go as planned?
Be that voice of reason.
So be a bit of a contrarian. Go against the tide,
Sometimes, yeah.
even when it feels uncomfortable.
It's about having a plan for those what-if moments
So preparing for the unexpected.
and acknowledging that you might be wrong.
Humility.
Yeah. Exactly.
And we can't forget emotions, right? Fear and greed.
They can drive markets to extremes.
Like those emotional roller coasters we talked about.
Housel says it's crucial to not let emotions cloud your judgment.
Easier said than done sometimes,
It is.
but that's where discipline comes in.
Having that long-term perspective,
And sticking to your plan.
even when things get rough.
Don't get swept up in the euphoria or panic.
Stay focused on the long game.
So important. And this brings us to another crucial point Housel makes. Financial success isn't just about accumulating wealth
It's about using that wealth.
to create a life of meaning.
It's a tool, not the end goal.
So it's not just about the numbers in your bank account,
It's about what those numbers allow you to do.
how you live your life.
Align your choices with your values.
It's about creating a life that feels rich, not just financially. I love that. And to illustrate this, Housel shares his own story about saving up enough money to...
Quit his job and pursue music.
It wasn't about becoming a millionaire.
It was about freedom,
Control over his time.
living life on his own terms.
It's a powerful example. Financial independence doesn't have to mean having a fortune.
It can be about making choices that align with your priorities.
Living a life that feels authentic.
And it goes back to that question.
How much is enough
For Housel, it was about achieving a level of freedom,
to pursue his passion?
not about a specific dollar amount.
I love that. It's about using money as a tool for self-discovery.
And creative expression.
It makes you think, what would you do if money were no object?
What are your dreams?
It's a great question. And while money isn't a magic wand,
It can create opportunities,
remove obstacles.
help you live a more fulfilling life,
It's about using it to unlock those possibilities,
and create a life that's rich with experiences.
not just possessions. Speaking of possessions, Housel goes into some fascinating trends that have shaped the American consumer.
He takes us back to the period after World War II.
That time of celebration and anxiety
And one of the strategies the government used to prevent another downturn
was encouraging spending.
they wanted people to buy things, to fuel the economy.
It was a deliberate effort to create this culture of consumption.
Absolutely.
And they used advertising as a tool,
Advertisers got really good at targeting people's emotions.
creating a sense of want.
Even when people didn't need more things.
It was like this narrative of more is better.
Always strive for the next big thing,
And television amplified that message.
bringing it right into people's homes.
It's incredible how those historical forces, those policy decisions, have shaped how we think about spending today.
It really is.
It's important to be aware of those influences,
To understand how they might be shaping our own beliefs and behaviors.
even if we're not fully conscious of it,
It's about becoming more mindful.
of those narratives.
Those external forces that can influence our decisions.
And to further illustrate this point, Housel discusses how the nature of consumer goods has changed over time.
Back in the 50s, consumer goods were seen as necessities.
Things that made life easier.
Like refrigerators, washing machines, cars.
Convenience, improving quality of life.
Exactly. But as time went on, the focus shifted.
Toward luxury items,
Status symbols.
things that were marketed as a way to express yourself.
To enhance your social standing.
So it went from, I need this to make my life easier.
See, I want this to look good.
I need this to fit in.
Exactly.
And this shift toward conspicuous consumption was fueled by
Credit cards.
instant gratification,
It's all connected.
this emphasis on status, easy credit, the constant advertising.
It created this recipe for what we might call affluenza.
That feeling of being stressed or unhappy despite having material wealth.
You got it.
It's paradoxical. We have more stuff than ever.
But are we happier?
Makes you wonder if this pursuit of more, this striving for the next shiny object,
Is really the key to a fulfilling life.
that's the question Housel wants us to ask ourselves.
He suggests that true happiness,
Often comes from things money can't buy.
strong relationships,
Yeah, but-
experiences that create lasting memories.
It's about recognizing that money is a tool.
It's not the source of happiness.
It's about finding that balance between financial well-being.
To pursuing a life that feels rich in all the ways that matter.
Beautifully said. And then he shares his own story about saving up enough money to...
Quit his job and pursue music.
It wasn't about the money.
It was about freedom.
Aligning his choices with his values.
Creating a life that felt authentic.
Yet it goes back to that question. How much is enough?
For him, it was about freedom, not a dollar amount.
Such a powerful example. It can be about making choices that support your priorities.
Living a life that feels true to you.
And he brings up this really interesting point about the American dream.
Yeah, we're the wealthiest nation in history.
But are we happier than we were in the 1950s?
When wealth and incomes were much lower.
It makes you think, right? Maybe it's not just about how much money we have,
It's about how we use it.
the kind of life it allows us to create.
And he provides some fascinating historical context about the American consumer.
How that's evolved over time.
Yeah, he takes us back to the end of World War II.
A time of both celebration and anxiety.
People were relieved, but also worried about the economy.
They were afraid of another Great Depression.
Millions of soldiers coming home, needing jobs.
So even with the victory, there was uncertainty.
Absolutely.
What did the government do?
Well, one of the key things they did was keep interest rates low,
To make borrowing cheaper.
encourage people to buy homes, cars, appliances.
It was a way to stimulate the economy.
Keep things moving.
So a deliberate strategy to boost spending.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is where we see the birth of the American consumer as we know it,
Exactly. And along with that, they loosened credit regulations,
making it easier to get loans and credit cards.
which of course led to a surge in consumer debt.
But it also fueled economic growth.
It was a gamble, but it paid off in the short term.
There was so much pent-up demand after the war.
People were ready to spend.
It's interesting to think about that context, how those policies shaped our thinking about spending and debt today.
It's a powerful reminder that our individual choices.
They're always happening within this larger economic and cultural framework.
Exactly.
Wow, this is all so fascinating.
Yeah.
And it looks like we're about out of time for this part of our deep dive.
Already. We've covered so much.
I know. From behavior and personal history,
To the power of compounding.
the dangers of chasing more,
Staying in the game.
accepting volatility,
Building in that room for error.
and the historical forces that shaped the American consumer.
From post-war policies to the rise of easy credit.
It's been a wild ride, but we're not done yet. Stay tuned for the next part of our deep dive.
We'll be exploring the role of stories,
The impact of economic trends.
and how money can be a tool for creating a life of meaning.
Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to our deep dive into the psychology of money. Before the break, we were talking about how the American consumer came to be. But did everyone benefit from this economic boom?
That's a great question, and it actually leads right into a point Housel makes about economic growth. It wasn't always evenly distributed.
So some people were being left behind.
Yeah, and this really started to become clear in the 1970s.
What happened then?
Well, a few things, actually. The Vietnam War, rising inflation, and then you had increased competition from places like Japan and China. All of that really shook things up.
So people's expectations and how they were behaving with money, those things were all changing.
Yeah, and some people kept seeing their incomes rise, but for others, wages just stagnated. They didn't really go up. Some even went down.
But people still wanted that middle-class lifestyle. The house, the car, sending the kids to college, all of it.
You're right, and that's what Housel calls the big stretch. People went deeper and deeper into debt just to maintain that lifestyle.
It's like they were trying to keep up with the Joneses, but it wasn't really sustainable.
And the media at the time, with all the advertising, it just kept pushing this idea that you needed more stuff to be happy.
You deserve it.
Everyone else has it.
Right, and that just added fuel to the fire.
And all that debt, plus those stagnant wages, it created a real strain that we're still seeing the effects of today.
It's a reminder that even when things seem good overall, not everyone's benefiting equally. And I'm curious, how much of this keeping up with the Joneses, how much of that is because of the stories we tell ourselves about money, about success?
Oh, that's a great point and a perfect transition to another part of the book, the role of stories.
Housel argues that we're always making up stories to make sense of the world.
Right, especially with things that are uncertain, things we don't understand.
Like the economy, right?
Okay.
And our personal finances.
Exactly.
Can you give us an example of how that works in real life?
Sure. Take the dot-com bubble. Remember that? Back in the late 90s, investors were throwing money at internet companies. It was like...
The gold rush.
Yeah. And often, those valuations were completely...
Out of whack.
Yeah, disconnected from reality. They were swept up in the excitement of the internet.
Like they forgot the fundamentals, believing in a fairy tale even when the evidence says otherwise.
Right. It was this narrative of a new economy where the old rules didn't apply.
And when the bubble burst,
Which it always does.
people were left wondering, how did I get caught up in that?
It shows that even the smartest people can be swayed by a good story.
Especially when everyone else seems to be buying it too. Social media certainly doesn't help with that, does it?
Definitely not. And Housel points out that we saw the same thing happen with the housing bubble.
In the mid-2000s.
Yep, people convinced themselves that real estate prices would just keep going up forever.
And with easy credit, it was like a recipe for disaster.
Exactly. A classic self-fulfilling prophecy. Prices went up because everyone believed they would.
Until the bubble burst. And it was a rude awakening for a lot of people.
It shows the danger of believing in stories that promise easy riches.
So how do we protect ourselves from that? From those tempting stories? How do we become more discerning?
Housel says to cultivate a healthy skepticism. Question everything, especially those prevailing assumptions. Especially when it seems like everyone's buying into the same story, you got to be the one who says, what if this is wrong? What if it all goes south?
So be that voice of reason.
Right. Have a plan B, you know? Think about those alternative scenarios, those what-if moments. Be prepared.
So acknowledge you might be wrong. Plan for the unexpected.
Exactly. And don't forget about your emotions.
Emotions are powerful, especially when it comes to money.
Fear and greed can really drive markets to extremes. Think about those emotional roller coasters we talked about.
I'm getting flashbacks, ups and downs, twists and turns.
Housel stresses that we shouldn't let our emotions make decisions for us. It's about that long-term perspective.
Sticking to your plan.
Even when the market's going crazy.
Discipline. Not panicking when things get rough. That's tough, though.
It is, but it's key to long-term success.
It's like remembering that you're in this for the long haul.
Exactly. Time is on your side. Be patient, stay disciplined. Those are the secrets.
So we've talked about questioning those stories, managing emotions, and having a long-term perspective. What else does Housel suggest?
He also emphasizes aligning your financial choices with your values. It's not just about the money, it's about what you do with it.
So it's about using money to create a life that feels meaningful, not just having a lot of it.
Exactly. Think about the experiences you want, the relationships you want to nurture, the impact you want to make on the world. Your money should support those goals.
So define what success means to you. What does that life look like? And then make a financial plan that helps you get there.
You got it. And he gives some good tips for doing that, like track your spending, see where your money is actually going. You might be surprised.
Oh, I know it would be. So many little expenses add up without you even realizing it.
Right. Once you see the big picture, you can make conscious choices about spending and saving.
And automate that savings.
Right. Make it a priority, like you're paying your future self.
I love that. What other strategies does he talk about?
He stresses the importance of having a financial safety net. That emergency fund is crucial.
Just in case life throws you a curveball.
Right. And invest in your education. Take a financial literacy course. Read books like The Psychology of Money.
Arm yourself with knowledge.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask for professional advice when you need it. A financial advisor, a tax person, an estate planning attorney, whoever you need.
Build your financial dream team.
Yes, it's about taking responsibility for your finances, being proactive, and not being afraid to ask for help.
It's this whole person approach to money. It's not just about the numbers, it's about your well-being, your life.
And that's really what The Psychology of Money is all about. It's not just about the mechanics of finance. It's about understanding your own relationship with money, making choices that align with your values, using money to create a life that feels good, that's fulfilling.
That's such a powerful message.
It is. And it's one we could all use a reminder of sometimes.
Absolutely. Well, it looks like we're just about out of time for this part of our deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, from historical trends to practical tips for managing your money.
It's been a fascinating journey, but we're not done yet. When we come back, we'll wrap up with some final thoughts from the book and talk about how we can apply these ideas to our own lives.
Stick around. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our deep dive. We've been talking about all these fascinating ideas from the psychology of money, how our past experiences, the stories we tell ourselves, and those big economic forces can shape our financial decisions. What else stuck out to you from the excerpts?
One thing that really hit home for me is Housel's focus on the long game, thinking long-term, the power of compounding.
Yeah, it's like we were talking about earlier with Warren Buffett and Jim Simons. It's about giving your investments time to grow. Patience.
Right, absolutely. Building wealth, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. You can't rush it. He makes this great analogy. Imagine planting a tree. You wouldn't expect it to be a huge oak tree overnight, would you?
Definitely not. It takes years for a tree to really grow.
And it's the same with your money. One of the biggest mistakes people make is trying to get rich quick. They jump from one investment to the next, always looking for that hot stock tip.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to make the tree grow faster by pulling on the branches. This doesn't work that way.
He really stresses finding a good investment strategy and sticking with it, even when things get a little scary in the market.
So don't let your emotions drive your decisions.
Right. Take a deep breath. Remember your goals. Don't let fear or greed take over. He says the people who really succeed with money, they're the ones who can control their emotions. They stay the course, even when things get tough.
It's like riding out the storm. Don't abandon ship when the waves get rough. But I can see how that would be tough for a lot of people, especially when your portfolio is taking a hit. How do you cultivate that kind of resilience, that emotional discipline?
Housel talks about understanding your risk tolerance. How much risk are you comfortable with? Everyone's different. And it's important to invest in a way that aligns with your own comfort level. If you're constantly worried about the market, you're probably taking on too much risk. And that can lead to making bad decisions just out of fear.
Yeah, find that balance. Challenge yourself to grow, but don't set yourself up to panic when things go down.
Exactly. He also talks about diversifying your investments.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. Spread your risk. Different asset classes, different industries, even different countries.
Okay, so long-term perspective, managing risk, staying disciplined. What else does Housel recommend?
He brings up this really important idea of aligning your money with your values. Using your money to build a life that's meaningful, not just financially secure.
So it's not just about the money itself, it's about what it allows you to do.
Right. He says to think about the experiences you want to have, the relationships you want to build, the impact you want to make on the world. Use your money to support those goals.
So what does success really look like to you? Define that, and then make a financial plan that helps you get there.
Exactly. And he gives some practical tips. For example, track your spending for a few months. See where your money actually goes. You might be surprised.
It's easy to lose track. Those little expenses here and there, they add up fast.
Right. Once you see the big picture, you can start making better choices.
And automate those savings.
Exactly. Make it a habit, like you're paying yourself first.
I love that. What other strategies does he suggest?
Build that financial safety net, that emergency fund, and invest in your education. Learn about money, take a class, read books, stay informed.
Knowledge is power, right?
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to get professional advice when you need it.
Find those experts who can guide you.
Exactly. It's about taking responsibility, being proactive, and getting help when you need it.
It's like a whole person approach to finances.
Yeah.
You're not just a spreadsheet. You're a human being.
Yeah.
Your values, your goals, your dreams, those are all part of the equation.
I think that's a great takeaway from the psychology of money. It's not just about the numbers. It's about understanding yourself and your relationship with money, making choices that feel good, building a life that feels rich, not just in your bank account, but in every way.
It's about using money as a tool to create a life you love.
Exactly.
Well, it looks like we've come to the end of our deep dive into the psychology of money. What a fascinating conversation. I hope our listeners have enjoyed it as much as I have.
Me too. It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you. Hopefully this has given everyone some food for thought.
Remember, understanding yourself is the best investment you can make. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
恭喜你又听完了一本书，订阅以便不错过更多精彩节目，也别忘了分享给你的朋友，一起快乐听书学英语。